Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, the 15th of June, 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson. And we're going to be joined today by live video Skype link by Guy Taylor, who will be giving us an update on his recent court case, recent court success. That is going to be fascinating news. And we're also delighted to have David Ellis from Strategic Defence Initiatives with us, who's going to be giving some high-level analysis on what's happening with Britain's military, and in particular what's happening in political circles, and amongst those high-level retired officers, military officers, who finally seem to have woken up. But before we get going, just a comment on the weather. How would you describe it in Plymouth, Mike?
I wouldn't like to, in case I said something inappropriate.
Right, hammering down with rain, just quite extraordinary. And the roads local to us are already flooding. Reports across the country vary everything from rain to cloudy, Glasgow dry at the moment. So there we are. Patrick Henningsen not with us today, so I can't give you an update on the weather in Phoenix, Arizona. I have a suspicion it's probably still hot and sunny. Well, let's start off with Guy. It's great to see you smiling. We've put a special slide up here where you've got a smile on your face. Tell us about that court case yesterday and how you got on and what it represents for justice in the United Kingdom.
Well, it was the case whereby I'd been ripped out of the house in March by a load of coppers and sent over to Aberystwyth. I wasn't told what it was about, and then when I got there, they gave me no information, and I ended up spending 20 hours in custody.
Okay. Sorry, we have a little bit of feedback. I think keep going because we can make out what you're saying.
Right. So when I was taken over to Aberystwyth, the case was adjourned till April the 14th. April 11th, and because I said I didn't know what it was about and that I'd received no information, I didn't know what I was defending, the CPS said, were told that they had to provide me by the court. They were given an order that they had to provide me by the 28th. They had to provide all the case papers. 28th came and went, nothing. So myself and Linda drove over to Aberystwyth on the 11th of the trial, and of course the clerk there wouldn't let me talk, and I ended up getting 7 days in custody. And the case was heard in my absence. When I was in the police station, they said that I'd failed to attend. So this was the appeal for that. And we went up to court 2 weeks ago, and they heard the three witnesses that were the people originally in the court that were claiming the incident took place. And there were two solicitors, one for the council, one other individual called Alan Davis, and a security guard. Now, these people had said that basically, there was a man in there, he'd kicked off, they recognised him as being me, that there was a kung fu kicks going around, people were being threatened to be killed, and all sorts of nonsense. So the appeal was on this basis. Well, of course, I still hadn't received any information until May the 18th, which ready for the trial, so I still didn't know what it was about. So I didn't know what I had to defend, and ultimately, I hadn't said whether I was there or whether I wasn't there, because I didn't know what the incident was about. So come the appeal 2 weeks ago, the first witness got up and all he'd said was that a gentleman was there and he'd recognised this gentleman. But of course, there was no identification parade. And the second one said that there was a gentleman there, but he was someone called Guy Walker. And he said this 11 times. And he said the wrong date. He said the 20th. And the third guy who was up there was a security guard. And again, he said that he would recognise the guy who was kicking off in the court if required to do so. But the point being, when we got to court, I'd said that there hadn't been any identification parade. I didn't know any of these people. And without admitting or denying anything, how were they going to identify me? So me and the judge had a bit of a dispute in the beginning, and he said, well, I said, there's going to be a doc identification. These people are going to come in. They're going to say, that's him, Gov. And he said, no, that won't happen. No, that won't happen. So anyway, the first witness, when they came in, they said, would you recognise this gentleman who approached you? And he said, yes, it's him. So I said immediately, objection, there's been a doc identification. The second witness got up. And the same thing applied. He said, oh, we're talking about him. And he pointed to me. And I said, doc identification. And then the third one hadn't said anything like that. And I said to him, would you recognise this man again? And he said, yes, it's you. So the doc identification. So the judge had a fit at this point 2 weeks ago and said to the CPS, because they basically wanted me to say if I was there or not. No, I'm not defending anything. I don't even know what I'm defending at this point, so I'm not saying anything at all. So they said, is there CCTV? And the third witness, the security guard, said, yes, there is, and I've given it to the police. So he said, does it support what you're saying? And he said, yes, it does. So we adjourned for 2 weeks, and we waited with anticipation what the CCTV was going to show. He said to me, have I got an objection? I said, no, I'm quite happy to see what went on there that day. So the CCTVs came through. And, of course, it doesn't support what he says. There is a 3-second clip of me, what could have been me, coming through a door. Could have been disputed, but ultimately there was nothing going on in the court. There was nothing going on outside. There was none of this kung fu kicking. So when it came to yesterday, the CPS, who were very good on this particular occasion, I must say, conceded that there was no evidentiary support in this docket, and in fact, it said other than what the security guard had said. So the judge said, right, okay, so I'll hear your submissions after we hear the contempt of court situation. So I made submissions that there was going to be an abusive process application and no case to answer. We then had the wonderful experience of calling the CPS from the previous hearing, the girl, up to be cross-examined about the incidents with the clerk. And of course, in a statement that I'd received, that she'd wrote some notes, it was clearly saying that she felt basically bullied and compelled by the clerk to give evidence, and that he basically forced her into this position. So I went very lightly with her because she was, as far as I was concerned, a defence witness. And we went through all that, and that was fine. We then called this clerk up. Well, I had him in the box for probably an hour and a half. And it was very interesting because I had some notes that he'd made, which he didn't realise that I had them. And they were, I'll read you the first sentence. I was the legal advisor that dealt with the above case yesterday in Aberystwyth. I was fully aware that the case would be a difficult case to deal with, given that Mr. Taylor is a freeman of the land and has a history of being disruptive in the courtroom. Mr. Taylor also has a very long antecedent history. Now, that's saying straightforward that I was there for this charge and he had found out and done his homework on me. So, of course, I was able to ask him about this. And the first thing I said is, so what is this freeman on the land situation? Can you tell me about it? So is it a cult? So you said, no, they don't believe in they believe in the Magna Carta, not statutes and acts. I said, well, is it a cult? Is it like a gang sort of situation, you know? And he sort of, he and ahhed, but said, yes, well, it's a group of people. I said, well, aren't you discriminating against this group of people under the Equality Act? Because, you know, if they have a belief, then that's their belief. Anyway, I said, are you a member of any gang or cult? He said, like what? I said, like Freemasonry, like common purpose. And the judge harped up, what is this common purpose? So I had to explain a little bit to the judge what this common purpose was. I don't understand the question. Well, I know, you know, he reached a common purpose because of the way he behaves. But so all this was going on in the courtroom, and of course he wasn't able to support what he'd done. I mean, I accepted that I called him a clown because, I mean, basically I'd been dragged 100 miles from my home in the dead of night, locked up in custody, brought to court for not giving any information, and then when I went back there voluntarily, and this is all for an offence that is unimprisonable. You cannot go to prison for it. I'd spoken to our local clerk of the court in our town, who I know regularly do business with, and he's very good, and he said to me, you should never have been arrested for that if it's a Section 5. I mean, they can basically arrest you for Section 5 for breaking wind as you walk past them. It's a charge that they can arrest you for anything. It's the lowest public order offence. He said they should have dealt with it in your absence. If you'd received the summons or not was another issue, and then you could have appealed it. So, of course, we had this going on in there yesterday, and it went on all the way through to the end of the day. And at the end, my no case to answer submission was accepted. There was no case to answer, and the whole thing was a pile of nonsense. But because I called the clerk a clown, now I said to them, I don't believe it was a court. And I said to him, I don't believe it's a constitutionally established court. And when I tried to dig the clerk up on whether it was a constitutionally established court, the moment I mentioned Lord Diplock's ruling under contempt of court, the judge sort of blew a fuse, and he wasn't. Well, that was the only time he did blow a fuse in that direction, but he wasn't having that at all. He didn't want me questioning the clerk on what actually was a contempt of court, because I said, if it was a court, which I truly don't believe it is, but if it was a court, then you would have been the one in contempt of it, because under Lord Diplock's ruling, the due administration of justice requires first the unhindered access to the constitutionally established courts, and you were hindering my access at that point. But of course, the judge didn't want me to delve into these areas of law.
Right, Guy, just to come in, if I may, thank you for an excellent update there. So the case was thrown out. That was the key bit, the main substance of that case thrown out. First question for you is, what were the legal qualifications of that clerk? Was he a solicitor or a barrister?
He was a barrister, I believe. No, he was a solicitor, and the CPS was a barrister.
Right, okay. And then you have discovered that the court system now has a blacklist dossier of anybody that they consider has been near the free man on the land movement. So therefore, anybody who has attended anything which they could label free man protest is being discriminated against the moment they walk into the court. Is that correct?
That's exactly correct. In fact, he admitted that they basically had a book, and he said that none of the clerks in that area would deal with me, so that was he was called in like some bounty hunter. Oh, I've dealt with 60 or 70 of these free men situations, he said, and he said because they wouldn't deal with me. Now, and he then went on about Birkenhead. You were at Birkenhead. I said, well, along with 600 other people. And what you're saying there is right. There is this dossier that's going around. Now, they're calling them freemen on the land, but it's anybody who makes a complaint. If you're a lady who's got some sewage problems outside your house for some reason, and you withhold £30 a week from the council, then all of a sudden you're going to flag up on this document. And this is the frightening thing about it. And of course, I'm a little bit thick-skinned over the years, so whipping me out of my house and whipping me off somewhere on a nonsense is one thing, but people who've never had that sort of treatment done to them, I mean, it would be a really frightening experience. And there is this dossier, which was established yesterday, and they were having health and safety meetings based on this dossier.
Right.
What's going to happen?
Guys, thank you very much for giving us that. David Ellis, would you, if you're able to hear that clearly, would you have any comment on that as a sort of detached observer to that report?
Well, we're either going to have the rule of law or we're not. It just sounds like a complete fabricated, utter contrived load of nonsense here against Guy. So, it seems like the game's up. We've apparently got a list of people that are objecting. Yeah, it's absolutely outrageous. Totally outrageous.
Just before we move on, Brian, Guy, just one final comment. I mean, the Birkenhead, just to remind everybody, Birkenhead was the first time that I'm aware of that a judge was arrested for not sitting on his oath of office. Now, that was 2011, so here we are 5, nearly 6 years later, and that's really pretty much foremost in people's minds within the establishment, the legal establishment, it seems.
Well, it seems like it must be the top of the page, because why was he mentioning that in that courtroom concerning me? And I mean, look, if they're going to check what they're involved in and who they're involved, their belief systems are, for a simple public order offence that doesn't even carry a prison sentence, and they delve into it and have health and safety meetings to this extent. I mean, Birkenhead was a groundbreaking insofar as 600 people turned up because they'd had enough and wanted to put the things right with the judge. But I mean, I wasn't arrested at that, and the other 597 people weren't either,
Yep.
wherever the numbers were.
Yeah,
so it's worrying, it's concerning that if they're keeping this much data for this long, and anyone can flag up now, we're in a very dangerous situation.
Totally agree with that. Well, Guy, I'd just like to move on a bit, and I've got to say, on the subject of our pitiful state of British justice, that Melanie Shaw is back in prison. So the whistleblower from Beechwood Children's Home in Nottingham I believe has been back in Peterborough prison on remand for the last week. I've had one very brief letter from her which arrived yesterday, and I believe that she's currently waiting to go back into court. And I'm using the word believe. We have very little information at the moment, but I think what has happened is that Melanie is accused of having made some comment about one of the Nottinghamshire police officers, and this is being considered breach of a non-harassment order, and therefore she was picked up by Peterborough police, held, and is now back in prison. So we will update people as soon as we can on that. But let's just remind ourselves that, of course, it's all quiet on the paedophile front. Melanie Shaw, an abuse survivor, very brave lady, back in prison. Meanwhile, a wall of silence over the Goddard report. And I'm pretty sure that what we are now seeing is one of the best cover-up, government establishment cover-ups of paedophilia that we've seen, which is all the more remarkable because this has just hit the press, started to come out yesterday. It's already big topics today, I understand, and it's the fact that Sir Clement Freud has been accused of being a paedophile. 2 victims have come forward. One of them is this lady, Sylvia Worsley, an abuse survivor, and she maintains that she was attacked by Clement Freud some 60 years ago. Now, he's deceased, so I think we will see the media have a field day in the safety. But information has come out, so we'll put it on screen for you as simply as we can. So he was apparently born in Berlin to Jewish parents, came to Britain, joined the army. Interestingly enough, assisted with the Nuremberg trials. I'd like to know what his expertise was to be brought into that role. He then, after the war, gets involved with the Royal Court Theatre Club, and in 1952, he was helping to start the career of paedophile Rolf Harris. So an interesting little connection there. He then becomes a Liberal MP in 1973, and of course, one of his political colleagues is the paedophile Cyril Smith, former Cyril Smith. We've got a picture here from the Mail showing David Steele, the party leader, with Freud behind him and Cyril Smith in the background. Well, it gets better because the reports are also now highlighting that Sir Clement Freud had a villa in Praia de Luz in Portugal, which of course is the location of the Maddie McCann disappearance. And over and above that, he cooked for the McCann parents one evening, making the comment, "So Kate, which of the devout Catholic, alcoholic, depressed, nymphomaniac parts is correct?" That was apparently his opening remarks to a mother who had just lost her child. Remarkable comment that, Mike, I think. So where does it go? Well, Jill Freud, his wife, it's alleged that she slept with a 16-year-old boy when she was aged 47, which appears interesting. He's got a son, Matthew Freud, Emma, the daughter, who's married to Richard Curtis. And that's the gentleman that made the video of the children being blown up, which
Yes.
you focused on, Mike. Also, he helped start up Comic Relief. And then we've got another son of Sir Clement, which is Lucian Freud, and he specialises in particularly gross nudes. But of course, it gets better because Matthew's wife is Elizabeth Murdoch, and that takes us straight into the David Cameron and Samantha Chipping Norton set. There's been quite a lot in the press about very strange parties going on, but we'd like to remind people, of course, that Prime Minister David Cameron's judgment with respect to paedophiles is pretty weak. So the picture showing him alongside a very dangerous common purpose paedophile, Matthew Byrne, Heseltine in the brown coat. And remember that Cameron is the man who said, well, of course, all of this nonsense about child abuse in Westminster is exactly that, nonsense.
Just a slight correction. I think Lucian's his brother.
His brother, is it?
And of course, his grandfather was Sigmund.
Okay.
So there you go.
We will correct that. Guy.
Yeah, sorry, Guy.
Yeah, I mean, look, his grandfather was Sigmund Freud, who was a starter of psychiatry, saying that everything was basically about sex. And if you read anything that written by Freud, which I happen to have done in the past, he's obsessed with cocaine. Cocaine is the answer to everything. So cocaine, and this man is the man who introduced psychiatry really to the world in the way he's introduced it. And of course, his grandson. Now there are all these questions. I mean, it probably goes way back, way deeper than we can even imagine. It's amazing what you've done there.
Well, Guy, I'm going to say I'm afraid I can imagine it, and I'm pretty confident in what we're looking at, which is a criminal Westminster, where we certainly have criminals and paedophiles running Britain, and of course we're now paying the penalty. Over to you, Mike, I think.
Well, here we go. The threats increase over Brexit, so this is driving people, in my opinion, other people, I mean, most people probably disagree with this, but in my opinion, this is driving people towards a Brexit vote. Osborne saying that he's going to have to slash public spending or increase taxes or increase taxes. He's going to hold an emergency budget to tackle a £30 billion black hole if the UK votes to leave the European Union. And here we've got Reuters commenting on this as well, saying that 57 Tory party members or Tory party MPs would attempt to block this. Osborne said we would either have to get more money in by raising taxes like income tax, or you have to spend less on the big public services like the health service, or the education system, or the defence budget. The country does not have a plan. If we quit the EU, we'd wake up in just over a week's time with no economic plan for our country, with financial instability, with years of uncertainty, and you'd have to cut your cloth accordingly. The country would not be able to afford the size of the public services that we have at the moment. So there you go. More EU psychology at work there.
Threats and more threats. But basically, this is the plan, Mike, isn't it? That we come out, and the next step is to bring down the country. I'll just introduce David Ellis again here, because last weekend, Saturday, if I remember correctly, David was in Portsmouth, where the Veterans for Britain held a rally, and one of the key subjects that finally breached surface was the demise of the military. David, can you tell us a bit about what went on there?
Well, it was a tremendous, succinct and very, very short, sharp message from Major General Julian Thompson, Royal Marines, which was absolutely bang on target in terms of what's involved, what isn't involved, and just absolute clarity and vision of what the situation is. He was then followed up by Admiral Roger Lane Nott, who frankly gave a knockout performance behind the lectern of really just everyone choose your flag. You know, do you want a EU flag on your ships, planes, and so on and so forth, or do you want a white ensign? It's very, very straightforward. You know, this is clear now. It's very apparent, and make your choice. You know, get to the ballot box and make your choice. There was then a speech by Julian Brazier, Minister, and Penny Mordaunt, and there was a series of questions immediately afterwards, and I asked the panel very, very succinctly, do you think the British public would support military union, and more importantly, all that goes with it, the industry, the policy of not just internal, external, the money flows, our jobs, you know, our companies that are still hanging on for grim death despite being, you know, strangled to death by successive governments turning the money off, turning the industry off, and therefore, you know, the military can't have this equipment. You know, we're seeing huge delays with Mr. Cameron, Mr. Osborne, and Mr. Letwin ordering and placing orders for ships and our submarines and the Trident replacement, which is going to seriously cause us problems. And the answer came back from Admiral Roger Lane Nott in terms of would the people support it? No. Very, very succinctly. No, they will not. And I firmly believe that. There was then some more questions, and I think the best question was from a rather distinguished gentleman with a rack of medals on his breast that asked Penny Mordaunt with regard to what would happen post a Brexit vote, and could we expect Mr. Cameron's government to uphold that vote? And Penny Mordaunt said that she trusted David Cameron. So there was great consternation at this from not just the senior officers, and the audience, because obviously this is somewhat contradictory, because this isn't the message that the Brexit side really wants. We want something that's hard-edged and clarity, and that's exactly what we got from the officers. And the gentleman's point is we've heard way too much from the politicians and these alleged personalities. What we need is more officers to stand up and speak out. So there was a good quorum there of very senior officers, and frankly, I think, post the talks I've had with them before and after the meeting, they've now got the message.
Right, David, thank you for that. I know Mike's going to come in on the subject of NATO. I've heard that Vote Leave seems unusually to be a bit squeamish on the subject of the formation of the European military. Have you also heard anything about this, or is there anything you can tell us?
Well, there's certainly. We've tried to get them to pick this up from day one, even before it was announced that they'd got the rights to run the campaign. So the other groups are still going on. We're seeing UKIP virtually campaign as an independent unit, and Aaron Banks's Leave EU group. So what we need really is the right language to be used, and we're nearly there, because the senior officers are starting to use it. And what we're talking about is ever closer EU military union and all that goes with it. It is not a question of EU army, because it's not as simple as that. It's EU army, navy and air force. They will have control of policy, internal, external. They will decide capital budgets, i.e. what's getting made and where. Now, you can bet your bottom dollar that the majority of these projects that will be made under the guise of EU, how are we to know they're going to be made in Britain? The chances are they're going to be redistributed into the rest of the EU zone. So, we've got that as a major consideration. We have to use the right language. This is EU military union. And what we're not getting is the right hard-edged message from the likes of Penny Mordaunt and Julian Brazier. What they're saying is, all very well, but we need short, sharp message, and it needs to be prescriptive. And we need to be talking about the important stuff, about the money and the jobs and the industry here in Britain. We're not getting that. We're getting a little bit, frankly, from the rest of the Vote Leave construct and the predominantly conservative faction within it. A little bit too much political hyperbole that's Tory party biased, rather than the issue and policy and challenging this policy. So that's what we need, and I think the gentleman in the audience hit it absolutely beautifully. We need more officers to speak out, and we need them to speak out quickly.
Right. Well, thanks for that, Dave. Now, NATO is meeting at the moment. Here is the defence ministers, the NATO defence ministers. This is a fine bunch of people, Brian.
Well, upstanding members of society,
yes,
indeed, I say, with a smile on my face.
Yes, so they're in Brussels yesterday and today, and this is in preparation for the NATO summit, which is in July in Warsaw. And apparently the main focus of this meeting is on modern defence and deterrence. And here's the key point, Dave. It's cooperation between the EU and NATO and expanding the zone of stability. So absolutely a key part of this discussion is how this EU military construct that you're talking about is how that is going to operate alongside NATO or within NATO. Well, this morning actually, as well as that, there was a sitting of the NATO Ukraine Commission. Now Jens Stoltenberg, there he is. He was saying that over these 2 days, the participants in the meetings are going to take decisions on strengthening collective defence. There's the words: strengthening collective defence and enhancing cooperation with partners. They want to get more involved in the battle against ISIS, they claim. I think they mean the protection of ISIS. And Stoltenberg said, we will discuss how we can extend our training for Iraqi officers as they continue to fight ISIL, ISIS, Daesh, whatever it is. But they're also going to maintain the alliance's broad geographical layout of bases in Afghanistan. Apparently, they're not going to wait to see what Obama may do. He is just giving mixed messages about expansion or contraction of US troops in Afghanistan. So in the meantime, what's Britain's input to this? Well, here's Michael Fallon, and he's saying that hundreds of British troops are going to be deployed in Eastern Europe. This is under a major NATO operation to deter Russian aggression. So there's the quote. It would send a very strong signal of unity and our determination to defend the Baltic states and Poland in the face of continued Russian aggression. 150 to 200 British troops deployed to Poland to train local forces, apparently, and they're claiming to be getting increasingly unnerved by Russian behaviour in the region. Dave, this rhetoric is dangerous, isn't it?
It's very dangerous rhetoric, and once again we're using on that end of the spectrum all the wrong language. Show me this Russian aggression for a start off. Principally. Ultimately, the responsibility for this nation's security rests upon the shoulders of our servicemen and women and what fixed defence assets we've got when anything kicks off. So it's a nonsense then to say, whether we do that under NATO or whether we do it within an EU construct, heaven forbid, the stronger we are, the stronger NATO will be. So this overlapping, as we're seeing at the moment, of the EU wanting to overlap their military construct with NATO. And we've already seen that NATO has taken orders under the guise of subcontracting out in the Aegean, that these orders are being subcontracted from the EU and the Commission with the naval exercise out in the Aegean. So this is a model that will probably be repeated. Now, of course, there isn't going to be two pots of money. There isn't going to be a pot of money for NATO and a pot of money for the EU construct. That simply just isn't going to happen. And it's a sort of inverse self-fulfilling prophecy, really, that the EU desperately requires military union in order to carry on with its plan, tactics and strategy. It requires the military union in order to get the greater treasury. So it's a highly prized objective for them. So inversely, they'll talk up war because they have to have something in order to give birth to this military construct. There has to be an argument and something to catalyse it. So this nonsense that's going out in up towards the Russian borders is frankly not a good idea, and I'm reassured by that, by some communications that I had personally with the lead American military attaché in Moscow, slightly before Sochi and the Ukraine incident, that what was going on just frankly wasn't being conducted with any sense whatsoever. And it's still not being conducted with any sense whatsoever because, we can see the game. The game here is, we need to give birth to an EU military construct. And in order to do that, we're gonna trump up some sort of catalysing event to do it. So, they're all aware of that now. This is not a secret. But I just find it absolutely insane that we're going to go prodding around. I'm afraid I'm going to have to quote Nigel Farage here. Who do you think you're kidding, Mr. Juncker, if you're going to go up there and start poking that big Russian bear? It's a nonsense. It's utter nonsense.
David, fantastic analysis, and the Russian bear is absolutely right. There was some discussion on leadership in the army, in which they were quoting Montgomery. Montgomery was also one of the people who said, number one rule, don't go up against the Russian bear. But if it was true that Russia is so aggressive, we would surely expect to see defence spending on Britain's military increasing. This is the great conundrum, the great lie from David Cameron's government. On one hand, Russia is apparently a very real, increasingly dangerous threat. But what does Cameron do cutting British military? So let's have a look at these reports from the press, which tell a pretty amazing story. So the Mirror here has said a third of British sailors want to leave. They want to jump ship from the Royal Navy. And what does it talk about? It talks about the fact they're not getting the foreign deployments. They're working too hard. There's manpower shortages. They haven't got the skilled technicians. So that's one problem. And then the Mirror's also saying, well, 30 years ago, we had 30 submarines and 48 frigates and destroyers. We're now down to 11 submarines and 19, so massive cuts. And at the same time, they're pumping out the rhetoric that because we've got one Russian submarine somewhere near the Channel, this was a few days ago, apparently we're all going to be murdered in our beds by the great Russian bear. But look what's happening here. Things in the services, the Navy, are so bad that they're having to borrow US Coast Guard men and others, including French Navy, in order to run the ships. Well, what's going on here, of course, is the cutting of British military to force the need for French officers and sailors to serve on board the British aircraft carriers. We can remember the Nimrods, that's been cut, of course, and that means absolutely no maritime surveillance capability at the moment. And all of the trainers were destroyed, the airframes were destroyed as quickly as possible. And we've had a whole series of reports here that the Air Force is falling apart. We've got the carriers going, well, we've talked about those. Scrapped, of course, in Turkish shipyards to give our new European brothers some good income. We've got the Nimrods there, and then we've got a report here which was British Army cuts are one hell of a risk. And we just said you should vote Conservative because at least you know what you're going to get. Mike, you've consistently flagged up this aircraft, the F-34.5, I think it's called now.
Yes.
So here's the new aircraft for the carriers, but it doesn't work. And I'll leave you with this one to think about, which is that we've got the Royal Navy Engineering College cut back in the mid-90s. So the Royal Navy hasn't even got inbuilt engineering experience. We're supposed to get military engineering experience from civilian colleges. This is madness, isn't it?
I think so. What's next?
Well, I'll just bring this on. I'll put the pause in there because let's add in this. We've got Armed Forces weekend coming up in Plymouth. So this is part of the adverts for it. And the first thing I'm going to point out is that we've got a corrupted national flag or white ensign. So whichever flag they've chosen, the objective is the same. They're actually destroying the symbols of national identity. And this is one I've noticed when travelling now on the motorways. If you're going to top your car up with eco-electricity, we've got a green and black national flag. And if we put some of this into context, this was the dots. I know they're very small. The dots were warships anchored in 1935 at the Spithead Review, hundreds of warships in 1935. This was Navy days in 2009 when we had a Navy big enough to run Navy days. By 2012, the local Plymouth Herald in Plymouth, we've got people begging to bring back Navy days because we didn't have enough ships or men. That then is morphed into Armed Forces Day. So we haven't got a big enough Navy, so let's bring in the Army and the RAF in order to make sure people don't understand what's happening. We're going to protect, unless we do something about it, this is the next step, which is welcome to EU Forces Day. And if you're not aware, the badge next to the ring of stars is actually the badge for EU military forces. David, I hope I've hit the spot there. Just give us a brief comment on that if you have something you'd like to add.
You've absolutely hit the nail on the head. They've turned the money off for decades. They've strangled the armed forces and our industry to death so that the industry now is incapable, it's slow. You compound that with the MOD with too much meddling, and you end up where we are now, where essentially the current government is marching towards the sound of EU military guns. It's as straightforward as that. You can see that they thought that this was going to be a good idea, and we would do defence with EU military union. And frankly, no, it's a nonsense. It's an utter nonsense.
Yep.
Yes. Okay.
We'll put in that silent pause again when we're lost. We don't know what else to say because this is unfolding so quickly and it is so obvious. And of course, let's remember David Cameron and his Conservatives utterly lying to the nation over where he's really taking us with the EU. We're back on the subject of law and order.
Yes, because obviously we've been talking about the changing relationship between individuals and the state for quite some time now. And our relationship is taken to be based on the principle of consent. And I'm sure Guy will have something to say about this in a second. But this is Mr. Pauly versus the first group. Seems like a fairly small story in terms of geopolitically or globally, but nonetheless, there's an interesting aspect to this. This is a wheelchair user, disabled man, Doug Pawley, and he attempted to take a bus trip to Leeds in 2012. And there was a mother with a pushchair and a baby on the bus, and her pushchair was occupying the disabled area on the bus. And so he could not get on the bus because she simply refused to move the pushchair out of the way. So he sued First Group on the basis of the Equality Act 2010, and he won his case initially. First Group appealed that successfully in the Court of Appeal, and this has been going backwards and forwards now. It's now in the Supreme Court today. And at the basis of this, Guy, if we get some comment from you on this in a second, but at the basis of this is the principle of consent. Because, of course, you could very well say that here was a disabled man trying to get on a bus, and a particularly ignorant lady would not move out of the way. She could quite easily have collapsed the buggy to move out of the way so he could get on the bus. But this is now being used as the mechanism by which, and it's being funded by this organization, the Equality and Human Rights Commission. It's being used as the basis upon which the Supreme Court is being asked to make a decision on whether the bus company should be compelled to force an individual to move out of a disabled bay in the event that they're occupying that bay with a buggy or shopping or whatever else. And so it's no longer a question of appealing to somebody's better nature and
reasonable discussion.
A reasonable discussion. It's about compulsion, and it's not about consent. It's about compulsion. Guy, this is a bit more than just a simple case of equality for disabled people, or even a simple case of ignorance on the part of bus users. You're muted, Guy. You're muted.
Yeah. Well, this is it. Consent. When you challenge consent, it always comes at the barrel of a gun. It ends up that, when justice is gone, there's always force, and they're basically trying to force us into situations. Like you say, common sense dictates on these issues, and common sense should tell you that it was an unreasonable person involved in that incident, and if they were taken to court, they should have been lost the case and been challenged and not rewarded or used as a tool for something to further someone else's agenda. I mean, it's quite simple, quite straightforward.
Yep.
We do.
Couldn't agree more. Right. Okay, so we will move on now to leadership, because
favourite subject of mine.
Favourite subject of ours. Now, we've been saying that with all the amount of charity that there is in the world, it's a wonder the world is quite running quite so badly as it is. But that goes for leadership as well, because everywhere we see leadership. Well, today this is Hugo Swire meeting the latest batch of incumbents to the 2016 Foreign and Commonwealth Office Future International Leaders group. So here they are. This is to connect and engage with future leaders from emerging powers, as well as other selected partners through an inward visits program and subsequent engagement, representing an opportunity for participants and here's the key point, and a soft power tool for the UK. This is to create a dynamic network of talented, influential people providing mutual benefit to participants, their countries and the UK, a long-term investment in the UK's relationship with individuals who can influence our objectives. It began in 2013. There's the 2013 batch with the then Foreign Office, Foreign Secretary William Hague. We've got a photograph of them, but we're apparently not allowed to know who they are. So there you go. This is the data.gov.uk website, and if you do a search for this leadership program, one of the links that comes up is the alumni database. But when you actually go to look for the alumni database, you find that it's unpublished, and so you can't find out who they are. So who's behind this then, Brian, do you think?
I really couldn't guess, Mike, actually.
Well, a clue comes from the Coalfields Regeneration Trust in South Wales, because they went to meet them last year. And here's the key thing. This is a joint venture between the Foreign and Commonwealth Office and Common Purpose International. So this is a Common Purpose led leadership program.
Isn't it interesting that they went into South Wales, the Coalfields Regeneration Trust, and then we've got British Steel shutting down, which...
Well, even the Coalfields Regeneration Trust, it's about celebrating the demise of British industry and the regeneration, the replacement of it with tourism or something productive like that.
Yeah, excellent.
So just to give a little bit more on the background on this, the UK is more prominently positioned in leaders' engagement plans and decision-making than before. They say that they attract consistently high-quality, high-potential candidates into the programme from a diverse range of backgrounds and countries. It's all very common purposey. We have created a sustainable, mutually beneficial network of influencers, building lasting relationship between the group and between alumni and the UK. So it's soft power, as they say.
Soft
but
power.
It doesn't end with that, because today is the Digital Leadership Conference, Building the Nation's Digital DNA. Minister for the Cabinet Office, Matt Hancock, was there. He opened the 11th National Digital Conference, and he spoke about the digital transformation of government. He said, today's conference is all about how we make it to the future. And given that theme, it would be easy to start off with a riff on the marvels of modern technology. I could talk about blockchain, 3D printing, artificial intelligence, or data science. I could talk about how I drove around my constituency in an autonomous electric car this weekend, going for miles without steering or touching the pedals. But I'm not going to do that, because everyone here knows that digital is the easy part of digital transformation. The hard part is the transformation. So there you go. He went on to say digital transformation is business transformation. You can't redesign a service without redesigning the organization delivering it.
And that's the change agenda.
And that's the change agenda. That's exactly what he says. Our digital and technology fast stream is developing the tech-savvy leaders of the future, with a cohort of almost 100 graduates currently working right across the government. At the same time, we're working with our most senior civil servants to ensure they're equipped with the skills, tools, and vocabulary to lead this transformation. So this is the Digital Leaders website. Have a look at it. And tonight they are celebrating their success by giving themselves some awards. So that's nice, isn't it?
No, it's extremely worrying, Mike, actually, because of course most people can't see this at all. For you, David Ellis, I believe that this is a subversive attack on the country, and many of our senior military officers, retired military officers, have yet to grasp what is actually going on in the halls of Westminster. They live in Westminster as they remember it. They regard MPs as decent fellows. And I'm going to say, it seems to me that these senior officers are particularly ill-equipped to actually fight what is happening, which is a subversive attack. Is that a bit of an extreme opinion, or are these people a lot more clued up on what's happening?
There's certainly an element of that. It's changing. It's changing rapidly, thanks to some pretty spectacular blunders by David Cameron. But I mean, you can clearly see there from the construct of it almost looks like it's going full circle with coal and steel immediately after the war, which was the first thing that the unification of Europe programme went about. So we were sort of 70 odd years on, and we're coming back to that and seeing our coal and steel going out, being stripped out of the country, like with everything else. So this notion of whatever this plan is just frankly isn't working for Great Britain and the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. So the sooner that the MPs wake up to this fact properly, en masse, and get their act together and realise that this is a insurgency. Now, I've recently met with a small quorum of admirals who use that word. And one of the admirals in question, his specialism was fighting counterinsurgency wars. And he was absolutely under no illusion that this is what was going on. Now, the great thing about our guys is, of course, they do talk to each other, and they're very quickly waking up to this fact of exactly what's going on. You know, this political war that we're going through now isn't pleasant at all. You know, anybody that thinks this is some sort of pleasant pleasantries. You know, it is not. It's really very serious, dirty work that's going on in Whitehall at the moment. And the faster that people front up to it, and we see some hard edge language being used in order to challenge it and stop it and alert everyone, the better. Okay,
David, thank you very much for that. Guy, just 20 seconds of comment on any of the things that we've just covered.
Well, it seems that it's obvious it's common purpose versus common sense, and if you know someone who hasn't woken up yet, check their pulse.
Thank you. I think you win the prize on that one, Guy. Thank you very much for that. Well, that really brings us to the end of today's programme. Don't forget, we have got the UK column meeting in the George Hotel, Plimpton, tonight, starting at 7:30. So if you're in the local area and you haven't been before, do come along. We'd certainly like to see you. And I'll also say thank you very much to people who have now been moving across to the subscription side. So they've enjoyed free subscriptions for some time. But we're really delighted that, having asked, we're beginning to see people logging on to give us a modest monthly income. This is badly needed. Everything we do uses money, and something we would like to do again is to be able to help some of the key people who are doing such good work remotely from the UK column. And of course, they need travel expenses, they need phone bills paid, they need pen, paper and ink, and many other things. So we can only do it with your help.
Can I just say thank you to Lindsay in particular?
Okay. Mm-hmm. Good. All right, that's it. Guy and David, thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow at the same time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.